Hello class, this is Jeff Page. For my presentation, I chose the Experiences and Close Relationships Revised Questionnaire. It is an assessment of adult attachment, and I was first introduced to it in Dr. Stanley's Advanced Personality Seminar. So if anyone's taking that class coming up for summer 2, you will enjoy it. This is an assessment that I really appreciate. I've used it multiple times now with clients. It really helps me understand a client better. And so let's get this thing started. All right, so Brennan and colleagues in 1998 established the original Experiences and Close Relationships Assessment, the ECR. And the Experiences and Close Relationship Revised version, which came out by Fraley and colleagues in 2000, was just an update, and I'll explain why in a bit. But basically, this scale is a self-report item response psychological assessment that aims to measure one's current attachment style in close relationships. And it's deeply rooted in attachment theory and specifically about understanding adult interaction dynamics. And the purpose of this presentation, again, is to just briefly examine the assessment, its intended use, the normative data, some of the psychometric properties, and how clinicians can use it today. Okay, so getting into some of the purpose, the ECR-R, I'm going to probably just call it the ECR revised for the brief, but for the ECR revised, again, it's a psychological assessment tool to specifically identify one's adult attachment style, again, in the framework of personality theory. It really was developed from the abundance of research that expanded on John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth attachment theory to better understand emotion regulation, personality development, and interpersonal relationships. The assessment really looks at what motivates someone's behavior, and its theoretical underpinnings begin with the 4-category model of a young adult personality that was originally proposed by Bartholomew and Horowitz in 1991, which identifies that someone may dominantly possess either a secure, preoccupied, dismissive, or fearful attachment style within close relationships. The ECR revised uses 2 scales presented on a continuum, which I'll explain after, to measure one's avoidance and anxiety patterns within close relationships. And this helps determine, this scale helps determine which of these 4 attachment styles someone would most likely fall into. So to provide a brief summary for each style, a secure attachment style can look like someone who can develop trusting, lasting relationships, has high positive self-esteem, seeks support from loved ones in times of distress, and tends to communicate their feelings appropriately to their loved ones. A preoccupied attachment can look like someone who seeks intimacy but is often anxious or worried about that intimacy, and they might worry that others don't value them, so they're constantly seeking approval from others. A dismissive attachment style can look like someone who denies the need for close relationships or kind of just avoids them, and they have a high need for independence, and they would seek less intimacy. And a fearful attachment style can look like someone who has a desire for intimacy but is extremely uncomfortable and worried about or scared with closeness and intimacy. So they tend to avoid or feel unworthy and develop negative views of themselves. Okay, moving into some normative data and psychometric properties. Kind of mentioned at the beginning, but the only difference in the revised version of the ECR is that Fraley was able to use item response theory techniques to assess attachment and avoidance anxiety styles with more precision without actually needing to increase the total number of items on the assessment. So they did study over the course of 2 years after the original ECR came out, and they just, I guess they changed some of the items, and they just made it more precise and a better way to measure what it's trying to measure. The data used for the ECR revised were the same data, again, like for Brennan's original study, and this assessment was normed on 1,085 undergraduate students at the University at Texas at Austin. 682 of these participants were women, while 403 participants were men. The median age was 18 years with a range of 16 to 50 years. So a couple years later, Sibley and colleagues examined the 3 studies and looked specifically at the reliability and validity of the ECR revised, and They used longitudinal analysis and hierarchical lineage modeling to show that the assessment had strong test-retest reliability, discriminant validity, and convergent validity. In follow-up research that Fraley conducted in 2011, he reconfirmed this as well, and he's been doing research on this forever. Okay, getting into administering the ECR revised. So the ECR revised has 2 scales. Each are 18 self-report items. So the respondent answers based on a 7-point ordinal Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, which is 1 to 7. And the middle is 4, which is neutral. So it's broken up into 2 scales that combine them together for one consecutive assessment. But scale 1 measures specifically attachment anxiety, like I said earlier, and scale 2 measures attachment avoidance. So once the respondent completes the assessment, what you do is you add up the first scale divided by 18 and do the same for the second scale. And this will give you a number for each scale between 1 and 7. And you take that number, and basically 1 to 3 is low for that, what you're measuring. 4 is neutral, and 5 or higher is high. So once you have this data, what you do is, and I'll show you, is you plot it on Brennan's diagram of Bartholomew and Horowitz's original 4 attachment styles layout, and I'll get into this. So this is what the layout looks like, with secure in the top left, preoccupied in the top right, dismissive in the bottom left, and fearful in the bottom right. And so once you get those numbers from the scales, basically on the y and the x-axis, you'll just plot what they are, and then wherever their score falls in, that tells you that attachment style for close relationships is probably their more predominant style. Okay, so here are just some sample questions. So these come from the anxiety scale specifically. Things like, I'm afraid that I will lose my partner's love. And again, you're measuring it like on a scale of 1 to 7, 1 being like not at all, 7 being higher. I often worry that my partner will not want to stay with me. I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me. So these are really looking at worry, anxiety type symptoms. Here are some sample questions from the avoidance scale. It's really trying to look at how willing kind of somebody is to engage or avoid. So like, I prefer not to show a partner how I feel deep down. I find it difficult to allow myself to depend on romantic relationships. I do not feel comfortable being close to romantic partners, etc. Okay, some cultural considerations. So when using this test, it's critical to understand that it was validated and normed with undergraduate university students who were males and females in the United States. Additionally, with the range being between 16 and 50 years old with the mean age of 18, that means that 68%, or approximately 738 people within the sample, fall within 1 standard deviation from the mean, demonstrating that most of the test was normed on individuals in that emerging adulthood stage of life. So knowing this is absolutely critical to help clinicians realize that, yes, it can be unethical to administer this assessment for anyone who, 1, is not a university student, 2, does not identify as male or female, 3, doesn't fall into that age range, and potentially doesn't fall into the demographic it was normed on. So it did say that it was normed on U.S. university students, but that doesn't mean that they're from the United States. It didn't specify race, ethnicity, anything like that. So it's potentially not appropriate for anyone who's not in the United States, but not necessarily. However, what's interesting about this, and that I did a little bit more research on, is that the Psych Tests APA database shows that the ECR there's been so much research on it that you can find a revised version for Hungarian, Danish, Chinese, Greek, French, Korean, Slavic, Czech, and that's just to name a few. So there's a lot of extensive research on this for populations that are not just in the U.S. either, that can be found in the U.S. So it's definitely widely used and widely studied. But again, just very important to know that it was normed on that population, right? So you really shouldn't attempt to use it for anyone outside of that population. Okay, transitioning to some heuristic value and some conclusions. So after the assessment, it's the client's right to see the assessment results, but it's really up to the clinician's discretion how much you want to incorporate it into your treatment, specifically with disclosing the attachment style and what that means. But if you do, and you share it with them and you use it in your treatment, this can promote a client's, it can really help them with their self-understanding and self-awareness, which can help them see why their patterns of behavior or thoughts and relationships are the way they are. This can be very important because it can foster a sense of ownership, because they can take responsibility for how they're acting in relationships, because they can be more aware of how they're reacting. And you can really use this tool to help you develop treatment planning. For example, you can work on communication skills, and depending on someone's personality style and their attachment style, you can use different communication skills to improve relationships. Additionally, it can promote self-acceptance by helping clients not only interact better in relationships, like just previously mentioned, but it can allow them to understand and be able to work on assertiveness and communicate what they need from others in relationships as well. So there's a lot of value. There's a lot of value in this tool, and it really depends on if you feel like it would be useful. I used it now with one client so far, and this was a client who was very interested in self-awareness and self-discovery, young adult. So he was really interested, and he gaining a lot of insight from understanding his personality and attachment styles. Really helped him improve his relationships. And what we were able to do with that, not only to improve the self-awareness, self-understanding of himself, but we were also able to incorporate DBT skills and specifically work on interpersonal effectiveness, defining those critical, very useful ways of specifically how to interact with others based on his personality as well, which has shown improvement, and he has better relationships and better self-identity and more positive self-esteem as a result. So I've only used it with one client, but depending on how my future goes, I can definitely see myself using this with more clients as well. So I wanted to end with just a quote from Carl Jung that says, "One is always in the dark about one's own personality. One needs others to get to know oneself." I love this quote because we don't do things alone in life. We all have relationships, and sometimes it's the closest relationships that provide the most value to your life. And so we as psychotherapists play a crucial role in assisting clients to gain a deeper self-awareness, and we have responsibility to enhance the quality of their most important relationships if they feel like they want to work on them. And these are vital and universal things for all humans. Quality, and it's shown in the literature that quality relationships improve a person's well-being and wellness. Okay, that is my presentation. Thank you. Here is just a list of my references. Again, thank you for listening to this presentation. I'm excited to hear everybody's feedback, and I'm excited to watch all yours as well. Thank you so much. Great class, everybody.